Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined as always by Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we are finishing the week with just a 2 days worth of games here, obviously, after the All-Star break. But we are finishing things with another 8-game slate here on Friday night. We've got this video for you guys where we're talking about Bulls and the new-look Brooklyn Nets. And then we've got another game video and our player props up for you. So make sure to like and subscribe to that page. Also want you to head to thelines.com. That's where you can check out all the great written content we have for you guys this season. And use that odds finder tool we have up there. You can make sure you're getting the best odds available to you from those U.S. sports books. Nate, let's go ahead and jump into this 8-game slate and then talk Nets and Bulls.
Yeah, we got the Knicks, your Knicks, in fact, -2 at the Wiz. It was a pick 'em a minute ago, but Knicks gaining some steam. The Heat +1.5 at the Bucks. They always play them tough, and Giannis will be out tonight. Cavs on a back-to-back after losing to the Nuggets are +1 at the Hawks. Now past Nate McMillan after Trae Young got him fired. This game, the Nets are +2 at the Bulls. We will break down in a minute. The Hornets +6 at the Wolves. Thunder on a back-to-back +6.5 at the Suns. They're actually being bet on despite going to overtime last night in Utah. And then Houston +10 at Golden State. In the other game we look at, Kings are +7 at the Clips. So the total's been bet down a little bit here in the Nets-Bulls game, but I'm not really that interested in it in any direction. I'm just interested in fading the Nets, which I talked about in our futures episode over the break. They come out here with a really tough road stretch, and I haven't seen anything from this team to indicate that they can consistently win games on the road. Chicago is far from consistent. I mean, I guess we can start with them. I mean, consistently sucked. Heading into the breaks, lost 6 straight, probably thought some pieces were getting moved at the deadline, and they didn't. Really, maybe the worst offense in the league during that 6-game stretch. But now they get a nice break here. They get to gel a little bit, understanding that it's going to be the same team here, and they can push for a play-in spot starting here. And look, here's their game log when they've gotten extra rest, at least 2 days. They double-digit wins 3 in a row over Charlotte, Atlanta, Detroit, an overtime loss to Cleveland that took 71 from Donnie Mitchell, a weird loss to Houston, which is exactly what we talk about with inconsistency, an overtime loss to the Knicks, and dropping 144 to crush the Luka-less Mavs. And the key is DeMar DeRozan as well. When he gets a little extra rest, I mean, he still seems exhausted from last season. Man stands on his pulpit saying you should play 82 games to be the MVP, and he tries to play 82 every year. And last year he had an MVP caliber season, probably 5th in my book. And this year he just hasn't been the same guy because he seems to be still exhausted. So he goes in on a funk that included a bad game against the Nets and hasn't been great against the Nets recently. But when he gets at least 3 days rest this season, we're talking his best splits, most efficiency, 26 points per game, 6 assists per game. Usage rate is higher. Even on 2 days rest, the efficiency goes way up. So I'm looking to fade the Nets, and I love when you can see a recent loss to a team that's just full of outliers. The Bulls lost at Brooklyn 15 days ago. They shot 8 for 25 from 3. It's exactly how Brooklyn was able to beat Miami before the break, too, just lucking out on a bunch of missed threes. But they played pretty good defense on Brooklyn, held them to 43% shooting. Again, unsustainable three-point shooting from the other side. And the Nets bench goes 12 for 19 from 3. Joe Harris basically doesn't miss a shot. The Bulls were able to beat the Nets with KD and Kyrie at the peak of their powers the previous meeting, and that was at home. Chicago, better team at home. Stop me if you heard this before. Another better team at home. Look, they beat KD when KD had 44 points on 15 for 22 shooting. That's just absolutely nothing you can do with him. And Spencer Dinwiddie and Cam Thomas, as I said in that Futures episode, they're going to both have to go off, or Mikal Bridges in the most recent meeting. They're going to have to both go off, 2 of those 3 guys for the Nets to have any chance in a road game here. Dinwiddie does have good splits against the Bulls. Bridges has not. He's never really been the man like this. I don't really think his 45 points against the Heat is at all sustainable. Right. It's just the Nets have basically, they've lost 5 straight road games. Kyrie has carried them to 2 wins with 153 offensive rating in those games. And if it's the good and the bad Kyrie, whatever you want to say, that's the good Kyrie. And without that guy, I just don't see them winning many road games. I'm willing to take Chicago at a pick'em line.
Yeah, I can understand the logic. I'm following along with what you're saying. I think honestly, I start to lean under as a good play in this game, even maybe more than Chicago. I think I kind of believe in a little bit of what Chicago's done as of late, which, I mean, it's been better on defense. I mean, I'm going to talk about briefly, just like even in their last 10, and it's been consistent throughout this 10-game span for them where they're not winning it all, but they have the third best defensive rating. They are the third best in defensive rebound percentage. They are second in limiting opponent points, second chance points, and points in the paint, right? So like they're just good around the basket right now, playing a lot more defense. Maybe Drummond's getting in there for a few more minutes and helping out in that regard. But Pat Williams playing a little bit better as well. I will give him that. But it's also kind of directly related and correlated probably to their horrible offensive rating, which is worst in the league. In their last 4, they're averaging 98 points a game. They're making 8 threes a game. They have the 4th fewest free throw attempts per game. And I just don't like what I'm seeing from them. And it's probably right, like a direct result of DDR, of our guy DeMar DeRozan just being in such a big funk. You can talk about 7 games for him, 4 games for him, 10 games for him. It's been pretty below his averages, like you were talking about at 18%, with those really bad splits at 46 and 29 for DeMar. That's where it starts, because they're not a 3-point shooting team. They're a mid-range team, and they're a hope you can get to the basket with Levine, and hope that you have some slight mismatch with Vooch if you can find it, whether he's bigger than the guy guarding him or able to step out and make threes against slow-footed guys. It's just not much. I just don't like it, and as a result, I kind of like the under a bit more. You talk about how often they've been going under in that span since they've been losing. If you all go all the way back to 8 games when they played against the Spurs, they've only got 1 over in there against the Pacers, at a game that reached 230, which is understandable against the Pacers. Everybody does that. But I think under is a little bit better of a play to continue that streak for them in that sense. Brooklyn, on the other hand, with the offense that they have, look like getting up away from Mikhail the Destroyer and his ability to score 45 in that one game. Like we keep saying, it's an outlier. We're not really looking forward to, looking for that to continue. I think it's more important to just kind of look at what's, happened since they got the guys that they got. Obviously, they're making a bunch more threes, because that's now what their best offense is at this point. They're playing better on the wing, limiting 3-pointers made as well, which is what they do. Not something that you worry about against Chicago. You really need to worry about more of that mid-range. But they also are in the top 5 against the mid-range as well in that time frame, because they have a ton of guys who are 6'8" to 6'10" and are very long and can guard guys that are bigger than them or stronger than them even, because they're so versatile, and that those are the parts of the floor where they're going to be able to guard really well. I believe is the mid-range and that sort of like 15 to 17 feet from the basket kind of area that that is what exactly the Bulls own essentially at this point, and what the Nets used to own before they lost the 2 mid-range scorers that they have. And they're now, like I said, a 3-point shooting team, which I think Chicago's fine to deal with that as well. So rather than have to rely on a Bulls team that I haven't seen win a basketball game since like the very beginning of February, I just feel a little bit better taking under 226 points in a game that doesn't have on Brooklyn's side doesn't have the stars to really get up those points anymore, and on the Bulls side has just been so bad as of late.
Yeah, I think that we see teams come out of the break as refreshed for sure. So I'd be a little concerned that the Bulls offense is nowhere near as bad as it was, and that the Nets defense, granted with some guys moving in and out here, in their last 3 road games, they have a 142 defensive rating. They collapsed against Philly, which did go under. Good point there. I mean, but they just, at the Knicks, they allowed the Knicks to shoot 55%. Low assist rate for the Knicks, too, just 18 dimes, and that's kind of the ball Chicago plays, too, right? It's just going to ISO. DeRozan did have 29 the last time he faced Bridges and the Suns, so not that worried about that either. And I go back to that home win against the Nets, against the Durant Nets in early January, and they just bullied them. They won rebounding by 12. Yeah. They shot like 60% inside the arc, dominated the paint. So they don't need to depend on this 3-point shooting. But like many teams, they are a better 3-point shooting team at home. So, maybe I can convince you by saying we're worried about the Bulls scoring too much to ruin your under. And then we don't trust the Nets offense to score very much on the road. So why not just take them at -2?
Yeah, I can do that too, along with the under, to be honest. And yeah, it's sad. It's almost like sad what's happened to a degree with Nick Claxton. And he looked a lot. He's one of those guys, honestly. He and Royce O'Neal were two guys that definitely benefited from playing with stars where they didn't have to go and get their own shot. They didn't have to figure out how to score at all. They just had guys that could get them wide open, either under the rim or from three, in O'Neal's case. And both of them are seeing a reduction in minutes since they lost those stars. They're seeing a reduction in usage and efficiencies, everything. So I think there's something to be said for that, in the fact that, like we were saying, this is a team that was built upon a bedrock of two of the greatest scorers in the league and in the history of the game, and everything sort of collapses once you replace them with two up-and-coming, really solid wing players like Cam Johnson and Mikal Bridges that just aren't on the same echelon. So that is all the time.
And by the way, yeah, I should mention the futures bets, plus 800 right now for the Nets to miss the playoffs, but even better, plus 390 for them to just be in the play-in. And they're only 2 games out of the play-in right now ahead of Miami. It's like almost a lock that they fall into that spot. They have a tough schedule the rest of the way, including 4 of their next 5 on the road against Eastern Conference playoff teams.
Yep, and you mentioned the plus 800 for them to miss the playoffs. Beautiful odds there. I love the plus 380. I think that's almost a lock, because what we're saying is you need the Knicks and the Heat both within 2.5 games of this team and the Nets to jump them, and now they're the 7th seed and they're the play-in, and I think that's highly likely to happen in the last 24 games, much more likely than the plus 380 that you get and the implied probability that is so low according to the books on that one. So.
And then we have Clips -7 at home with the Kings on a back-to-back here. Total's been bet up to 237.5. It might keep climbing. And I am looking at that first and foremost here, looking to go under again. And it's scary for multiple reasons. I mean, number one, the Clippers have the most efficient offense in the league over their last 14, scoring nearly 120 a game despite playing at a 95 pace in that span. Are holding opponents to 113, so that would still get us under. But the Kings' averages are obviously much higher. I mean, they are the highest scoring team in the NBA this year, and their back-to-backs in 9 situations have averaged 244. They've been really shootout heavy. I mean, there is some skewed numbers in there, like an overtime game with Dallas, like a game in Philly that was also like an overtime and a crazy style. But look, on the road, the Kings are a different team. And so this is more about trusting the Clippers defense at home and what they've done recently against the Kings, and not trusting the Kings offense to be as prolific on the road. It's like an 8-point per game drop off. And what they do well, I mean, they're 10th in 3-point percentage on the year, but it's 25th on the road. And LAC, the 9th best 3-point defense. Kings in scoring inside the arc. They're 3rd on the road in that department, 2-point percentage. Again, the Clippers are 9th in that. Yeah, I mean, 5 straight unders on the road, 19-9 to the under on the season for the Kings on the road. They were way under in 5 straight. Then they had a couple overs, 2 of them against Houston, 1 against the Pels for an outlier game, and then they go hella under against Phoenix in their last one. And also the Clips, their last game we saw before the break against Phoenix. Great defense against a Suns team that has Devin Booker back at his full powers, and Paul and Ayton and all their weaponry. And the Kings, I mean, they're coming off a great showing against Portland. No defense there, but their last 5 against the Clippers have gone under. I mean, they smacked them last time because it was another one of those Clippers punt games where Amir Coffey was starting, no disrespect. Brandon Boston Jr. as well, like his game, but not their usual starters. No Kawhi or PG. In game 2 this season, they had PG, who went off for, I think, a season-high 40. De'Aaron Fox also goes off for 36, only missed 8 field goals. And that game still only gets to 220 in Sacramento, by the way. So that is the complete opposite of the splits we're looking at, where the Clippers are excellent at defense at home. Kings offense drops. Both teams also shot 40% from 3. So I'm just looking at the way these two teams play each other and much more so than the fact that the last time we saw the Clippers face a team on a back-to-back, it was the Warriors. They dropped 134. Look, the Warriors are playing shootouts with everybody. The Kings are playing shootout with a lot of people, but when you look at those 5 unders in a row on the road and how consistently they've gone under, when they play a good defense that can line them up a little bit, these games definitely tend to go under.
Yeah, I'm with the under a bit on this one. I know it's a bit scary, and the Clips have scored a few points here and there, in their recent matchups with a few different teams, but not to the tune of this many points. I mean, that Warriors game when they were at home, the Warriors maybe they're somewhat comparable to the Kings in terms of not playing defense on the road, but not as bad as the Warriors, in my opinion, to be honest. I think there's something to be said for the pace that these teams play at. Obviously, we kind of throw away the last game they played, like you said, no Kawhi, no Paul George. It's just a different game. But in the last roughly like 15 games, that's I think the best sample size that we have. And Kawhi's played in almost all those, I believe it, as well as Paul George. There might have been one game in there that they missed, but either way, when they're both in there at that point, 10-4, we talk about that, and the scores in these games, they just rarely get up to that level, to that score when they're at home, especially unless they're playing a team that they're just completely blowing out, like the Spurs or the Warriors, who don't do anything close to defense on the road. But I think the Kings and the way that they play on the road is huge here. That it's a little bit more about their lack of offense than anything. There is something to be said about when they're worse on offense, at times it looks like they're also better on defense, because they were able to limit some of those blowouts. But in this one, I think we just rely on the fact that the Clippers and the way that they're playing right now is a little bit more controlled. Now, we should throw in the fact that Russell Westbrook is likely going to play for them tonight, and that's my segue from saying they've been playing a little bit more controlled basketball to I don't know what's going to happen now with Russell Westbrook. I personally don't think I will be betting on this one, but if I were, I would be actually leaning towards the Kings to cover 7 points at this point, just because I think that's a little bit too great for the unknown that we have with this Clippers team and what's going to happen with Russell Westbrook, especially what's going to happen to our boy Terrence Mann, who has become a show favorite as he's been hitting his low prop totals that he's been getting repeatedly, and we can't even find it right now as we record this the morning of the game because of this sort of uncertainty around Russell Westbrook. Not that whether or not he's going to play, it seems like he will, but just where is he going to fit in? It seems like he might start, but if he does, then he's taking Terrence Mann's new starting role as a point guard that I think he's actually getting a lot better at in his last roughly 4 or 5 games, in terms of knowing when to actually like score and take over rather than trying to get assists. And that's something that's going to get disrupted mightily unless Russ plans to come off the bench and just play a little bit more with that second unit. And then that leaves Terrence Mann sort of clean and free to play with the starters and do his thing that he's been doing. So if that's the case, then I feel a lot better about the Clips' chances in this one. But 7 points just seems too high in a game where I agree with you that there's going to be a bit less scoring. And if anything, then that does give the Kings a chance to kind of hang around and in a sloppier looking game.
Yeah, sloppy. And that's a great transition to talking about Westbrook. I should have mentioned in the intro, of course, that's a huge wrench to throw into this whole projection situation where we just don't know if he's going to start. Ty Lue's been very tight-lipped about what his role is going to be. Will he push the pace more? The Clippers playing at about a 95 pace. Lakers were at like a 105 pace with Westbrook on the floor. Will that second unit be efficient, or will he muck things up and miss a ton of shots? It is kind of a big unknown. I think he'll come out with his hair on fire. I think he has a lot to prove. I can't wait to take his props when he plays the Lakers. I think the Clips will let him kind of go a little bit more because there's just not strong personalities, Kawhi and PG. And if Russ wants to just jump in and try to be an alpha all of a sudden, they might be okay with that in some regular season games. So I do think he was going to help them. I worry a little bit about the Kings after such an easy matchup last night against no Dame, maintaining their efficiency. I do think they can get blown out here. But I would rather have the Clippers at -3 than the Kings at +11 is basically my take on that, on who's going to win the game. Because the Clips, I mean, they're looking like a championship contender. They were before this big deal, which is, could tip the scales a lot. Or Westbrook might only play like 18 minutes in like a really bit role, and they continue doing what they're doing. But either way, they have a lot more talent than the Kings. And this is another futures outlook. We talked about the Clippers passing them in the standings, about the Clippers winning this division and just finishing strong. And all those things can happen starting tonight in the first of 2 matchups with the Kings in their next 5. I do think they're going to win both of those to kind of assert their status and get up to that 3rd seed.
God, I hope you're right, because I definitely laid some wood on the plus 390 for them to win the Pacific Division right before we came back from the All-Star break a few days ago, and so that would be lovely for me. And the more I think about it, the more when you said Westbrook might only play like 18 minutes, like I actually could really see that happening. Like, how awesome is it for the Clips that the Lakers are just, they're not paying Russell Westbrook $40 million, right? They're going to be paying him basically like a veteran minimum and have him on their team while he's just getting tens of millions of dollars from other teams. I think that feels pretty good for the Clips. And in the end, I might actually agree with them picking him up just under that pretense, but we'll see what happens when he's in there, and we'll see if they're still on the run that we think they are. This is a huge game if they are going to win that Pacific Division and make a play and a legitimate run in that Western Conference. So Nate, let's go ahead and jump into your first NBA player prop for tonight.
Yeah, I hope some people took that plus 625 for DeMontis triple-double. Just barely got there. But yeah, we're moving on here, trying to pick some more winners. And piggying off the game video where we like the Bulls, we like the extra rest, and I like DeMar DeRozan with some extra rest to snap out of this funk. He's definitely a buy low spot here at 22.5 points, even money at DraftKings. Also even money for him to get 10 combined rebounds, assists, which is right about his average at home, in 2023. I mean, he's averaging nearly 24 points per game at home. A lot of their last 7 games before the break where they just looked awful were on the road, including one at the Nets where DeRozan struggled. I mean, he hasn't been a world beater against the Nets at all lately. I mean, how much of that is playing against Kevin Durant? And while Mikal Bridges is a great defender, he gave him 29 points at Phoenix early this season. So it's not necessarily a stay away spot. And it's just more about the rest for me. I mean, on 3 days rest this year, 30% usage rate for DeMar, 26 points per game, 6 assists, and his highest offensive rating at 127. So I think, and Brooklyn, even with Bridges coming back in here, they're allowing the 4th most assists per game in the last 7 to small forwards, allowing the most rebounds to small forwards in the last 15. So I do think we'll have some peripheral stats because Brooklyn's offense is not all that. Should be plenty of rebounds for DeRozan, but I do think he gets at least like 25 points here if you even want an alternate line.
I'm with it. I mean, I don't think there's going to be very many points in this game, to be honest. That's the only thing that scares me about it. That's something that we talk about in the game videos. My bet in that one is an under a little bit more than anything else. But I mean, DeMar, it needs to get out of this funk at some point, and I do think the 3 days rest combined with some success he's actually had against a defense that's going to look kind of similar to what he faced when he played the Suns earlier this season. I think there's something to be said for that. So I'm going to go with my guy, my favorite Knick of all time. I'm not being facetious here. Jalen Brunson, 26.5 points. It's high. It scares me a little bit, but he crushes Washington so far. I mean, this year in 2 versus Washington, 33 a game, 34 and 32 respectively, with an 136 offensive rating. He's also got 6 assists, 5.5 boards in that time frame. I'll also say the last game he played against this team when he was a member of the Mavericks, he did get 30 minutes in that game, only got 21 points and 4 rebounds, 5 rebounds and 4 assists. I say only, but I mean, he played 30 minutes alongside Luka, right? And he really probably played like 20 of those minutes without Luka on the floor. And then 10 of those minutes, he just had to stand there and hope that it was his turn when Luka decided he was tired on an offensive possession, which is just a crappy way to play offense. But now, obviously, it's Jalen's ball. It's his offense at this point. And he's been pissed since he got snubbed from that All-Star game, despite having such good stats and being the best player, in my opinion, on this Knicks team, at least the most crucial to the reason that they're in the 6th seed right now. And in his last 8, since he realized that he was not going to be an all-star, 32.5 a game and 140 individual offensive ratings. So, I mean, look, the Wiz, they've been better than, if you look a little bit more closely, they've been pretty good. I mean, better on offense, but also like much better on defense. Point guards can score on them. That is one place that they're a little bit more vulnerable. They seem to limit assists pretty well against point guards, but they definitely give up a ton of points, like the 9th most in the league. So it's not like that's the strongest position for them in terms of where they're playing on defense. Obviously, Monte Morris being the guy that they're hoping to stop him. So I feel good about Jalen being able to eat tonight.
I feel good about the over in this game at 225, right? And so, like, Jalen's scoring such a high percentage of the Knicks' points right now. The Wizards scoring 123 a game in their last 4 before the break, shooting 56% and 46% from deep. They've got their big 3, their medium-sized 3, whatever you want to call it, but they're playing really well on offense. And I mean, the Knicks aren't getting much of anything outside of Jalen and Julius Randle, especially Jalen in this type of matchup. So, yeah, I think he scores a lot if the Knicks are going to be anywhere near Washington on the road here. So looking in Milwaukee, no Giannis Antetokounmpo, and that means Drew Holiday. You know, let's see your high usage version. He's really taken a back seat this season because Giannis leads the league in usage rate whenever they have the big man in there. But with him out, it's going to be back to Drew putting up some of the crazy numbers we saw in the last few without him. Chris Middleton's still not 100%. He's definitely not ready to be the number one option. So, yeah. And it's already a good spot against Miami because that's a Heat defense that typically limits point guards. I mean, limits everybody. But guys like Drew that are just so tough and so versatile in their ability to score, they tend to put up numbers against Miami still because somebody's got to put it in the basket. And he has a 124 offensive rating. His last 7 against Miami, 20 points per game, 8 assists per game. Had played 2 recently without Giannis against Miami. The usage rate is at 26%, 10.5 assists. And in general, without Giannis this season, 24 points, 10 assists, 30% usage rate. So very high here. I think the 7.5 assists is a good bet at plus 100 if he's going to have the ball in his hands all night. 33.5 PRA. I do think his fingerprints will be all over this one. And you just look at the home numbers. He's shooting 50% from 3 at home in his last 10 right now, hitting 3.2 a game. For him to hit 3 threes is minus 118. Don't hate that. I mean, the Bucks offense is just, in general, much better at home, and Drew is no exception.
Yeah, it's my guy for sure. I mean, I picked him up in fantasy this season knowing Chris Middleton would be missing time, and that if Giannis ever did as well, that just meant Drew's usage was about to skyrocket. So it's going to be an interesting roster that they're now throwing out there. We'll see, Joe Ingles and Javon Carter and Bobby Portis are going to get some increased minutes. Middleton's starting. He was on a minutes limit before they went to the break. We'll see what happens, but it doesn't matter. Without Giannis on the floor, even if Chris Middleton's out there, who's ever out there, Drew's going to be out there for what, if they're trying to win this game down the stretch, he might get close to 38, 40 minutes. He's not coming out at that point as a guy who they need all over the floor. So with that fact alone, I do like Drew tonight as well. So I'm going to finish with an under for us, Nate, and I'm taking a guy that I love. I've been talking about him, Nick Claxton. He's been probably the best rim protector in the league. I mean, he's got the best opponent's field goal percentage at the rim this season outside of Jaren Jackson Jr., but he's played a lot more than Triple J as well. I will say it's just been a little bit different for him, like we talked about in the game video, since the trade of the superstars. That's just what he relied on to eat and get some of his numbers and points especially. But I'm going under on the points, rebounds, and assists. The assists are at 1.5, which he averages 1 a game. So I'm very happy to throw assists in there. The points and rebounds as well, but 24.5 there, minus 115 on DraftKings. The last 3 since the team got blown up, and he's been playing alongside guys like Cam and Mikal Bridges. He's only played 25 minutes in that time frame. He was getting closer to 28 to 30 when everybody else was on this squad. 7 points a game, 6.7 boards, and 1 assist in that time frame, well below 24.5 at what's that, 14, 15 total there that he's been combining for. That usage rate down to 13.6%. It was at 15, 16% with the other guys because he was able to at least get into positions where they were feeding him in the dunker spot and things like that. His rebounds are down on the season. He's got 9, 8.5, 9 a game, but in the last 4 or 5 with Day'Ron Sharpe getting in there, actually has more boards a game than Nick Claxton in just 15 minutes per game as well for the youngster. Might continue to see a bit more of him as they're probably not taking their finals chances pretty seriously anymore. And that Chicago defense that we talk about, that's been really, really good in their last 10, going all the way back. 3rd best defensive rating and limiting everything down low, second chance points in the paint, rebound percentage, everything that Nick Claxton would need to get those hustle points and then get those scrappy points and rebounds. I just think they're going to be limiting that too well for him. He's only had combined for 20 points, rebounds, and assists in the 2 games they played this season against Chicago, and that was with his guys in there in terms of Kyrie and KD. So just not a good spot for Nick Claxton, who might not even get enough minutes to get his stats tonight.
Yeah, it's a good call because the chemistry is not there yet. I mean, just so many new pieces on this team. And because Claxton, he just feeds off guys like Kyrie penetrating and then giving him the ball in the dunker spot. He doesn't have his own offensive set. He's not getting any back to the basket post touches or anything. He's definitely not getting any assists. I mean, maybe 1 out of luck here. And Chicago's a good rebounding team. Vucevic, I believe the last time these teams played was when I had the Vooch over rebounds, under points that both hit. But tonight, I think if Claxton's not playing as many minutes because they're trying to figure things out on offense, Brooklyn, I think that's even more reason to like the Bulls because I think Vucevic is going to eat against Day'Ron Sharpe or in a small ball lineup if that's how the Nets are going to roll. But yeah, I think you're right, under 24.5 PRA here.
Yeah, I hate it too because he was rounding into form this season in a way that he hadn't yet, and then it just all blew up around him. This isn't the roster for him and the way that he plays. So that's all the time we have for you guys, though. Continue to follow along, like and subscribe to that page. We're coming back to you next Monday as we look to stay wicked hot on these player props. So until we see you next, happy betting.